Good morning, my dear brothers and sisters, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Many Catholics think that today's celebration is the feast of the Three Kings. And so we sing, as I have sung in the beginning, We Three Kings, and we greet each other, Happy Three Kings. But while that is not entirely wrong, it also behooves us to clarify certain things about today's celebration. One, we can't really say for sure that they were actually kings. We traditionally say they're kings because the gifts that they brought were pricey. So pricey that only kings at the time could afford them. Hence, they could probably be kings. And second, we can't say for sure that there were three kings actually. In fact, Eastern tradition holds that there were 12 kings. But our tradition says that there were three because of the number of gifts that they offered. Gold, frankincense, myrrh, all three gifts. So most likely there were three of them. And third, tradition also attaches names to them. They were Melchor, Gaspar, Balthasar. But the Bible is really silent about their names. These names came out actually only in the 8th century. Did they also have camels? Well, on Christmas cards, they do, but we're really not so sure. And I tell you, that is fine. That is perfectly fine. Because today's celebration is really not about the three kings or the magi as Matthew would call them. But today's feast is really about Jesus, about who Jesus is. Thus, we call today's feast as the Feast of the Epiphany, from the Greek root word epiphanein, which means to display or to show forth. Today, Jesus shows forth who He is. He displays, He reveals His very identity to us. And the details which Matthew explicitly, and take note, explicitly included, which means we're sure that, and these things that he included in his account will help us know who Jesus is. First, Matthew writes that they were from the east. They're not from Jerusalem. They were foreigners from the east, which means they were outsiders and not insiders. They're also not Jewish. They were Gentiles, unbelievers, outsiders, people from the fringes, which tells us that this child, whose name is Jesus, will be a God for all, Gentiles or Jews, insiders or outsiders. This child, whose name is Jesus, will call people in. He will gather together everyone from north, south, east, and west, and He will be a light to all nations. And secondly, Matthew writes their gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, a gift fit for a king, which means that this child is royalty. This child is king. Frankincense, used for worship of gods and in prayers, which means that this child is divine. And myrrh, that which is used as an ointment for burial, perfume for burial, which means that this child will die and he will offer his life as a ransom for many. And third, which really caught my attention, was that they were magi. Magi, which has the same root word for magic. But they're not magicians. They are astrologers and astronomers. Because at the time, there was really no distinction between science and pseudoscience. No distinction between astrologers and astronomers. But they were educated people who were interested in the careful observation of the stars and of the planets. They were what we can call as early scientists. And they remind us that our love for the natural world and for the sciences can also help us discover God, can help us find God in our midst. Many young people today think that there is a conflict between science and religion. Cara survey reveals that young Catholics leave the church, leave the faith for science. And the typical age for this decision is made at the age of 13. They say, and I quote, "As I learn more about the world around me and understand things that I once did not, I find that the thought of an all-powerful being is less and less believable." Or another quote, "I realize that religion is in complete contradiction with the rational and scientific world, and to continue to subscribe to a religion would be hypocritical." Or another quote, "It no longer," meaning the religion no longer fits into what I understand of the universe. But in our whole Catholic tradition, we have had believers, faithful Catholics, even priests who were also scientists. Gregor Mendel, for example, was an Augustinian friar who was the founder of the modern science of genetics. If you have taken a science class and had to learn the terms dominant genes and recessive genes, it is thanks to Father Gregor Mendel. Or Father George Lemaitre, the first formulator of the Big Bang Theory. Yes, he is a Belgian Jesuit priest, a contemporary of Albert Einstein, who first thought of the primeval atom from which the universe expanded. While the modern-day Big Bang Theory differs already from the original, the theory still rests on the work of Father George Lemaitre. Our catechism has always maintained that there can never be any real discrepancy between faith and reason. Our beloved Pope John Paul II even described faith and reason as the, quote, "two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth." And we see this so clearly demonstrated in our gospel, in the journey of the Magi from the east. They carefully observed the star, and the star pointed them to Jerusalem. And when they arrived in Jerusalem, they said, "Oh, here we are. Where's the newborn King of the Jews? We are here to worship and adore him." You see, their science brought them to Jerusalem. It was a wing that brought them so close to the child Jesus. But that was not enough. We see another wing that completed their journey. Herod assembled all the chief priests and the scribes, and they supplied another detail from the Bible this time. In Bethlehem of Judea, for that's what's written in the book of the prophet Isaiah, they said. And lo and behold, they continued their journey, and the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them until it came and stopped over the place where the child Jesus was. Science and the Bible, reason and faith, these two wings led them to find Jesus in the manger. Friends, young friends especially, you really don't have to choose between science and faith, for there is no discrepancy, real discrepancy between them. God is God, and science is not God, but science can help us discover who God is, who Jesus is. But if you cling too much to it, you may be tempted not anymore to open the door when God knocks. A young widower who loved his 5-year-old son very much was away on business, and bandits came, burned down his whole village, and took his son away. When the man returned, he saw the ruins and panicked. He took the charred corpse of an infant to be his own child, and he began to pull his hair and beat his chest, crying uncontrollably. He organized a cremation ceremony, collected the ashes, and put them in a very beautiful velvet bag. Working, sleeping, eating, he always carried the bag of ashes with him. One day, his real son escaped from the robbers and found his way home. He arrived at his father's nook cottage at midnight and knocked at the door. He asked, "Who's there?" And the child answered, "It's me, Papa. Open the door. It's your son." In his agitated state of mind, the father thought that some mischievous boy was making fun of him. And he shouted at the child to go away, and he continued to cry. The boy knocked again and again, but the father refused to let him in. Some time passed, and finally the child left. And from that time on, father and son never saw one another. Sometimes, somewhere, you take something to be the fullness of the truth. If you cling to it so much, and the fullness of truth comes in and knocks, you may be tempted not to open it anymore. Friends, hopefully, we don't do the same mistake to God who comes knocking at the door of our hearts. Amen.